Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to services to entire businesses. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to check back on one of our favorite topics, streaming video. A lot has happened since we did our very first podcast on streaming last year when the pandemic first started. Some of it we predicted correctly, some of it we did not, but we're going to talk about it again and get into all the details today. How you doing today, D?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. I just saw something came up and said that CBS All Access is officially changing over to Paramount Plus.
I saw this during the Super Bowl. They had a bunch of launch ads in there, and they had a bunch of their franchises included, like Star Trek and some of the TV shows and things. As far as I can tell, it's just a renaming of CBS All Access, which makes me assume that they're going to have it's going to work very much the same way, where you have an ad-free subscription model, and then you're also going to have like an ad-supported free version, and those kinds of things. But it'll be interesting to see how they plan to move things forward.
Yeah, I like the name a lot better. I think it sounds cooler than CBS All Access.
Yeah, CBS All Access had the worst name, and that's compared to like Peacock, right? Like, how do you come up with a name that's worse than Peacock?
Yeah, it just sounds cool. Like, I always thought Paramount Pictures sounded pretty awesome. Or if you go to LA and you want to go on a tour of Paramount Studios, right? It always has like a really cool kind of sound to it. So I think this was a good option for them. I heard this, and one of the things that first came to mind was, man, there's a lot of streaming services now.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, eventually we're very much getting the point, and this is absolutely going to happen, where every studio has a streaming service. So, and it's because so much of it is driven by content. So if you are, Netflix saw the writing on the wall way back in the day when they made the decision to go heavy on original content. But eventually it's going to be, if you want that content, you have to go to that studio's streaming service. It's not going to be cross-licensed as much.
Yeah, we talked about this on the first podcast we did on streaming last year, was that, is this heading in the direction now of cable television in the late 90s, right? Where you have 100 different channels, you don't know where anything is, suddenly you're using TV guides and all that kind of stuff to find content. I know that wouldn't happen now because you could just search for it, but I do feel like we're heading down that path of like, now I have 5 services at $7 a month, right?
Yeah, and what I'm seeing from people out there when they're discussing how they react to all this is people are signing up for services in batches. So they'll sign up for Netflix for 2 or 3 months and then cancel Netflix and then sign up for Disney Plus for a couple months, catch up on new shows that have come out and movies that have come out since they were last subscribed, and just they'll work their way through. So then they'll cancel Disney Plus and sign up for Amazon Prime or whatever that is for a period of time, and then cancel it and go to something else.
Yeah, you mentioned Disney Plus in there. Boy, are they doing well. I mean, that was one of the ones I got to give us a little pat on the back for, because we were saying early on, before Disney had very many subscribers at all, we both had said on the podcast, like, this is going to be a big one. Like, they own a lot of content, a lot of rights to certain content that people love. And I know you did a little bit of research on Disney's Investor Day that happened earlier in the year, and the big bump that happened. You want to tell everybody what you learned?
They announced during their Investor Day, which almost seems like it's an SEC violation by announcing all this content at one time in an investor meeting. But they announced a ton of new Marvel shows, new Star Wars shows and movies, all kinds of content all at once. And it really showcased the power of Disney IP holdings and also just their skill at storytelling. You can't really have success with one without the other. Otherwise, you just mismanage a franchise, and nobody wants to see that. And the stock just took a massive jump based on that, because a lot of times the stock is looking towards the future and anticipating what revenues are going to be in the future based on growth. So people took a look at this and said, "Hey, Disney has, I think at the time, something like 70 million subscribers. When some of this content starts to hit, it's going to go huge." I think everybody also believed that Disney's other revenue streams like the parks and merchandise and those kinds of things are also going to continue to take off. So I think they had a massive spike in their stock price, and it's just going to continue to keep going up.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I'm actually a shareholder in Disney, so I just want everyone to know that before I provide my opinions. But early on, I mean, I think Disney was like at 98, and then from there, it just started creeping up. I think it's well in the 170s or something as of
Yeah.
last week. But when they first started, do you recall how many subscribers they had like within the first couple of months? It was like 30 million, right?
It was something like that. It was hard to treat it as meaningful, also because so many of them were free trials. Especially if you purchased your phone or signed up for like I forget what the membership was, but it might have been like, oh, if you signed up for T-Mobile or something, you get a year's worth of Disney Plus included. But
Mm-hmm.
those are, and even if they're not paid subscribers, they're still users, and users are pretty meaningful, especially when now all the buzz on social media is one of the major drivers for subscribers.
Yeah, and I remember it went from like 30 million, just to kind of give everyone some perspective here, from 30 million to like 60 million, and then 70 something million, and then recently I believe they're close to 90 million. Is that true?
Yeah, last I looked, it was at 86 million subscribers, which they did not expect to get to for another 2 years. So they've had massive growth. And I think obviously Mandalorian, Baby Yoda, that entire crew kind of really helped them to get them where they are. And now with the first Marvel shows starting to come out, we have WandaVision already out. We've got Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming soon. There's a lot of other content that's coming. I think that's going to accelerate everything because Marvel is so popular both in the US and overseas, especially China. Marvel's very well liked in China.
Yeah, I mean, I know that most of the people that I know who signed up for Disney Plus did it for The Mandalorian. And then obviously The Mandalorian just killed it. It's so good, right? And
Oh,
then they're
yeah.
going to come back with more seasons. They're having spin-offs. Like I don't see anything stopping the Star Wars franchise that's attached to Disney
Mhm.
growing these subscriber numbers just from that alone. But like if I recall when you and I first started talking about this, I think you said that the 2024 projection for Disney was 260 million people. Do you think that they can hit 260 by 2024?
Absolutely. I think they can blow right past it.
Well, Netflix is at what 203 million, I think,
Hmm.
and they're starting to flatten out a little bit. I think it's getting a little harder.
Yeah, we talked about this before. One of the things that Netflix doesn't have yet, and I think they'll get there eventually, is they don't have the big media tentpole action franchises that Disney has. So those are the Star Wars, those are the Indiana Jones, those are the Marvel films. Netflix is working on that. I saw a little while back Old Guard. We just rewatched it again with Charlize Theron, and that movie was great. It's based on a comic book. They're basically immortals like Christopher Lambert in Highlander. But I thought it was really well done. It has a great tone to it. The creative team behind it talked about how supportive Netflix was in getting their vision made, and it could be the beginning of them getting to those franchises. But Disney has such a head start when it comes to their content perception. So they're going to put out an Indiana Jones movie, and that's going to go huge. To get all these TV shows, they really finally figured out the tone and storytelling for Star Wars with The Mandalorian because they've been kind of struggling back and forth with the theatrical films. And then WandaVision. Oh my God, I don't know if you've seen WandaVision yet.
I just started. I watched the first episode. I was a little confused, but
Yes.
like it was really interesting, but I was a little confused, which made it interesting because now I
Mhm.
want to watch the next one to figure out what the heck's going on.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, it's the confusion's intentional. It's kind of like Lost or Westworld in the very beginning, where you have no idea what's going on, but it kind of makes a promise that you will eventually. And by the time you get to around the fourth episode and the fifth episode, it really starts to pay off some of these questions that you have, but it also just keeps going deeper down the rabbit hole of mystery. People have described it, have compared it to X Files at times. To me, it's so hard to describe. Like it comes off the first couple episodes very kind of candy coated, sitcom syrupy, and then that all just starts to crumble and fall apart as reality starts to reintrude. And it's just fascinating to watch. They have such great performances. I put it up right next to Mandalorian. I think I might prefer it to Mandalorian right now.
Wow, I mean that's a big thing for you to say because Mandalorian is amazing, I should say.
Absolutely.
So I was thinking about the reopening of the parks for a minute because I know that they're not fully open yet, and that's going to happen in time. But what would happen if Disney started giving away 2 months free subscription to Disney Plus for every person who buys a ticket to their park?
I think it's, well, for the most part, I don't know that they would make a huge difference because most of the people who are going to a Disney park, I imagine, probably already have a Disney subscription. If you're willing to
Maybe. See,
spend,
that's the thing. Maybe because
I
they're
mean,
not very fully saturated yet, right? Of their Disney fans.
yeah.
I think people are just onboarding right now. So I keep thinking like, could
Hmm.
2021 be the year when they go from 86 million subscribers, parks reopen, maybe giving away a couple of these coupons for like 2 free months or whatever it is, and blow past their projected numbers and hit like 150 million by the end of the year?
I think it would help. I think it would definitely help. And I think it would help because some of the people who haven't pulled the trigger yet, it would probably help them do that. But when you're looking at a $7, $8 a month subscription versus, who doesn't have that, who's now, let's say you're taking a family forward to Disneyland, what does that cost? Like $400 or $500 a day? If somebody's dropping that to go to Disneyland, then I imagine they probably already have that streaming subscription.
That's true. Yeah,
But
I was also thinking of the Hulu numbers too, because
yeah.
Disney owns Hulu, but Disney Plus and Hulu have not been integrated.
Well, that's because Disney doesn't completely own Hulu, right? They own a majority share of it. I don't know if they can necessarily just dissolve it without compensating the other stockholders and incorporate it into Disney Plus without giving shares to the other stockholders that are holding Hulu. I was going to say before we moved off the parks, I think there's a lot of bundle opportunities there. If you sign up for like a 1 year subscription to Disney Plus, maybe you get like a buy one get one free to go to the park or something like that. Or what would be even more interesting is they've got for example, some of the new Marvel rides are under development now. There's a Spider-Man ride that looks amazing, and there's going to be a few other rides that are going to come out. I can imagine if, especially with some of these shows coming out or movies coming out, if you go to the park, you get like a QR code or something like that, that can unlock some exclusive content on Disney Plus that the normal people can't get access to.
I am all in on that. I mean, I think that the immersive experience of blending what you watch on shows versus what you're getting in the park and all that stuff is going to start to seamlessly connect. I mean, here's a couple things. One is that I'm not sure the last time you went to Disneyland or Disney World, but the app that they have that helps you navigate the park, get on your rides,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff is now integrated with like, Star Wars Land. So you can
Yeah.
like turn things on in Star Wars Land and all that. It's just getting more immersive, right? Soon it's just going to be one big blended story experience, which is amazingly fun. But at the same time, what it does, it keeps people connected longer into the content and into the stories of each of these different franchises.
Oh yeah. If they had like a Falcon and the Winter Soldier ride or a street show or some other kind of experience that to coincide with the show hitting Disney Plus. And then you had, like I said, some of this exclusive content stuff. Maybe it's behind the scenes, maybe it's featurettes, maybe it's just like secret episodes or something crazy like that. Then it's like the in club for people who go to Disneyland, right? Then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, well, you get to see this, and I'm sure people would share it and it would get around, and it would get pirated because that's just the world we live in. But I kind of feel like at that point, even if it's pirated, it just drives traffic even more.
Totally. Yeah. And what do you think about this idea that keeps getting floated around? I know that Scott Galloway from Pivot Podcast and stuff keeps bringing it up, but the idea that Disney really doesn't have a bundle yet for their customers. And what he means by the bundles, which he calls the rundles, is this
Mhm.
idea that you would get like two, 4 passes to Disneyland, access to Disney Plus, latest releases of toys like plushies and all the Mandalorian toys and things like that. All those things and more for like one monthly price. So getting families to kind of buy into this like $100 or $200 a month, and you're just getting all things Disney like pumped to you on a regular basis. Do you think that they will go down that path? Because it's starting to
Well,
feel like they might.
I'm going to push back on it just a little bit, because if you look up, if you go to Twitter and type in hashtag Disney bundle,
Uh
you'll
huh.
get a million things pop up, and half of them are from Disney themselves because they are selling a bundle, and their bundle is Disney plus Hulu plus ESPN plus, and that is a bundle, so they do have a bundle. And whether or not that includes some of the other services, that's something to figure out. But it makes sense at some point for them to do a kind of an upsell. Like, you're a super Disney fan, you're close enough to get to Disneyland from time to time, or to Disney World on the East Coast. It makes sense for them to make an upsell version of that available. Like, I'm familiar with Scott Galloway's arguments on this, and I personally think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. It's not like subscriptions haven't been around for 100 years plus, like going back to New York Times and yellow journalism in the 20s and 30s, and even before that. One of the things that happens with the subscription, or a bundle, subscription bundle, is it can stabilize. It stabilizes your revenue, and it stabilizes your pricing, such that it will be resistant to going down, right? Because people are bought in, and they tend not to go through the effort of canceling something unless they're pushed to. But it also makes it a little bit more difficult to have some price flexibility going upwards. If you're looking at your operating costs and it becomes more expensive to produce these shows, or to operate the park, or something like that, then increasing the price is the kind of thing that can stimulate a lot of subscription losses. So you look at Netflix, for example, when they tried to split out streaming from DVD sale rentals, because the DVD sales are much more expensive from a distribution standpoint, they lost a lot of business, and they eventually came back because they walked it back, and a lot of those users came back and they started growing again. Once you stabilize, it works both ways. It's hard to stabilize against downward reductions in revenue without stabilizing against upward swings in revenue also.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. I would probably say that some companies seem to get away with like raising prices a little bit here and there on things like
Mm-hmm.
that, and some of them don't. I don't know
Yeah.
necessarily why that is. I think it could be the type of user. Disney's users feel like, or should I say, Disney's fans
Yeah.
feel like ones that would be like, oh, they got to bump it up a little bit. That's okay. Where like others, I don't know why, it just doesn't always seem to work out for them. I will say, though, that with Amazon Prime, which I think we're at now 83% of the US market, or 83% of households in the United States now have Amazon Prime, which is crazy. That's a huge number. They only seem to be adding to it. I haven't got my rate increased as far as I know, unless I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
But they just keep adding to it. Like, okay, now we're going to get you things delivered in one day. Now you're going to get to watch these movies before everyone else. So it seems to work with them, and I think a lot of people a lot of companies want to follow that, right? Because it
Yeah.
seemed to help out.
So Amazon Prime has, I want to say, 150 million subscribers. So it's difficult to attribute all of that to their video streaming service, because I have Amazon Prime. I very rarely use it for streaming video. And one of the
I
reasons is
agree.
because it has a little bit of unpredictable, like almost anything I want to watch on Amazon Prime, I'm going to have to pay extra to watch. And there's so much stuff out there that I don't have to pay extra to watch, that I'm probably just going to then switch over to something that I've already basically paid for. Things I notice about Amazon Prime is they will announce, for example, oh, we can get this to you in one day, when they've been doing it for like 6 months or 8 months, or I don't know when they started doing same day or next day delivery, but I've been getting it for quite some time now.
Yeah.
And then I read that, like, oh, they're now doing 1 day delivery, and I was like, well, they've been doing it for a while now.
I think that,
These,
though, because of where we're at, right? So we tend to
yeah.
get the betas here quite a bit, and then when they roll it out nationwide, that's when they make the
Mhm.
announcement.
Well, that's one of the things, is that it's for them, it's just optimizing their currently existing system. So that is getting deliveries out faster. That's reducing their cost in some ways because they don't have to house things quite as much. That's making their systems entirely more efficient. So that has the benefit of both in some ways reducing costs and also improving service to their customers. It's not exactly like they're providing an entirely new feature for free, right? It's not like you have Amazon Prime Music and video and all these other things. We're now going to provide Audible to you for free. Usually that's an upsell.
I will say that Amazon is pretty amazing at having obscure content that I can't find anywhere else. And the majority of time that I use Amazon Prime is when I'm trying to watch something that is, I don't know, a foreign film or somewhere else that's not available, and I can just pay for it. And usually the cost isn't that bad. Usually it's like $3.99 or something. So I kind of use it almost as like when we used to go to Blockbuster Video and you like walk around, you're like, hey, they have this, we got to get it. Right? Like it's not for content that is so kind of addictive and exciting that I have to keep coming back to it. Although I will say that, like, to be fair, all of these services, Amazon, Netflix, not Disney as much, but Apple TV, they're kind of starting from scratch, right? They're trying to build brands within brands, where like Disney came in and said like, hey, we own all these brands, right? We're just going to get them out there to our customers and start gobbling up as many users as possible onto our platform. So it is going to take a little while for the others to start to catch up and start to have kind of big hits and stuff. Like, for example, last year, I got really into The Queen's Gambit, and then I didn't think I was going to really love it after the first episode. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I'll watch one more. And the next thing I know, I've like binge watched the entire thing, and it was amazing. So there are certain things that are popping up. I know that's on Netflix, but other services, the Jack Ryan series on Amazon, really good. Good. I mean, is there anything on Amazon that you're watching at all or no?
It's hard to say. Like I've meant to get to the Jack Ryan show. I believe Hannah is a show on, like, I
yes,
really
it
like
is.
the movie.
Yep.
I haven't gotten around to watching the TV show. There's just so much to watch. I don't usually think about Amazon too much because it is kind of like the fallback. I can't find this anywhere else and I really want to watch it. It's not somewhere I'm going to go because I'm like, oh, I want to watch Goonies again because I haven't seen it in a few months and it's one of my favorite movies. Because I'm not going to pay an extra $4 to watch something I've seen a bunch of times before, right? It's less comfort foodie, and it's more, if I want to get to it, and I expect to have to pay a little bit more because I don't know what is included in the price. So that's one of the challenges with their business model.
What else has Amazon been up to lately?
So if you look at Amazon Prime, they actually have films that are in the theaters now, in movie theaters, that are available for rental for a price. So this is something that that made major headlines when Disney did it with Mulan and when HBO Max did it with Wonder Woman 84. But Amazon somehow has been able to do it in some kind of a sneaky way where people aren't up in arms about it. And I imagine this has something to do with some kind of compensation deals they've worked out on the back end, and probably the pandemic also. But you can currently rent films that are being shown in the theaters right now, which is potentially a bigger blow to the theater exclusivity window that occurs for theatrical releases. It's probably a bigger blow than what HBO Max did.
Yeah, and I think that's the future. I mean, this was attempted years ago, and from the former founder of Napster, and he got huge blowback on it. I mean, people were like, no, we're not going to let you put a system in people's houses so they can watch movies on the day they're released and everything. And ultimately, it's been heading this direction, with friction or not. People have these amazing experiences in their homes with huge televisions and great sound systems and nice chairs, and they want to watch movies when they want to watch it. So just charge them to do it, right? So if I'm willing to pay $10 per person to watch a movie on the day it's released in my house, let me do it. Like that's my perception of it.
Yeah.
I understand that's not good for the theaters and their business model, but I'm looking at this from the perspective of the user and what they want, and they dictate the future. The users tell you what they want, and you have to kind of go with it, right?
Yeah, you can't really dictate to the users. You can to a certain extent for a certain amount of time, but eventually, like, it just doesn't work, right? And you can look at the music industry for how well that's gone. If somebody wants it, especially something that's easy to replicate and distribute, like a digital information like media, then they're just going to get it. So you can be part of monetizing that or not. That's up to you. But I think we'll talk a little bit more about theater rentals or the theater experience and where we think that's going when we get to like HBO Max and some of the major stories that happen there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting that Amazon, as a much bigger player than HBO Max and even bigger than Disney Plus right now, is making these moves, and people are kind of going with it.
Netflix, on the other side, is killing it, as they seem to always do, but their numbers tend to be flattening out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think's going on over there?
So I think Netflix is in a weird spot where they have some good content. They've had a little bit of time in order to get that content made and get it distributed, but they've also canceled quite a few pretty good shows, and they need to fill it in. So they're generating content quickly, but they're also kind of don't really have the tent poles that Disney does or even HBO does.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to get there. Stranger Things has been a huge win for them, but those kids are growing up. I mean, once they're 25 years old, like the Harry Potter kids, then it just doesn't have that same impact anymore. So it's a good question as far as how long that show can keep going.
Yeah, but D, you're missing the big one, Cobra Kai. That's like the best. I'm so addicted to Cobra Kai.
I love Cobra Kai. I'm a little hesitant to give Netflix the credit for Cobra Kai since they didn't greenlight it the first time.
That's true.
They had to go make 2 seasons on YouTube, and then they bought it off them. So it's great that they have Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is fantastic. I don't put it in the same realm as far as overall quality. It's a great show. I enjoyed it a lot. I don't put it in the same realm as like Mandalorian or Stranger Things or even WandaVision right now. But if they keep going with it, that's great. It's just I get concerned with Netflix because every time I really get invested in a show, it gets canceled in season 3 or season 4.
Yeah. Like, what's an example of that, though? What's an example of something you wished would come back?
Yeah, there was a show called Low,
Uh-huh.
Alison Brie's show about the female wrestlers in the 80s. I loved that show. That show was great, had great characters. We really enjoyed watching it. And then partially because of the pandemic and all the contracts expiring and all the different conflicting schedules going on, it just got canceled. So it doesn't really feel like Netflix as a company is really committed to any of these franchises. And it's a little like this show could be gone at any one of your shows that you like could be gone at any time because Netflix is just doing the math. They're not really, I don't know that they necessarily have that creative commitment to telling the stories.
Yeah, there was a show on there that I got totally addicted to, and it was a space show. I'm trying to recall the name of it, where they go to Mars. It might have been called Mars or whatever, and it was so good. And then I heard, oh, they canceled it, and I was like,
Yeah.
what? Everyone I know has watched that and loved it, and now it's got canceled, right? But we don't always know the reason why things get canceled, right? Like you said, contract disputes. It could be anything, right? It's all behind the scenes stuff.
It kind of reminds me of how Netflix treats some of their, or how Google treats some of their products of just like, oh, we released this, it's out, people are loving it, but we're just going to cancel it. So, I mean, Google's known for doing that where they just leave people holding the bag. And that's kind of what I feel like Netflix is right now. The other thing that comes up for me with Netflix is where is the watch together feature, right? I feel like other people have it. It's an obvious use case. People really want a way to watch a show or a movie with somebody who's not next to them, especially during the pandemic. And now you have other companies like Disney has one, Amazon has it. Netflix, the best you can do is their third-party Chrome extension that had to be renamed Teleparty because they can't use the Netflix name because it's some other company and somebody else put it together.
Yeah, I'm guessing that maybe Netflix looked at it and the numbers weren't big enough yet. when it comes to engineering resources, maybe they looked at it and said, hey, if 300,000 people want to use it, but we have 206 million users, maybe it's just not there yet. I don't know. It makes
I don't
so much
know.
sense for Netflix because most of the people I know watch tons of shows on Netflix around the same time in the evening that I do. So I think it'd be super
Yeah.
cool to be able to click in and just see somebody, a friend of yours, and chat with them while you're watching a show. But I don't know. That's a big question mark, and it always has been. It feels like the next evolution of feature development for these platforms.
My understanding is that Netflix is focused on continued expansion internationally. That's where they expect to see the most subscriber growth. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to generate content in China and Korea and India and in Russia and other parts of the world to have locally generated content from the film industry that's there in order to grow their subscriber numbers internationally. But when you're in the situation that Disney is outstripping you both with kind of franchise power and with features at this point, I mean, Netflix absolutely probably has the best recommendation engine out there.
Mm-hmm.
But now Disney Plus has features that Netflix doesn't. So we'll see. Like, I don't really get their strategy right now. I don't know why they haven't also done something like this, which is if it's easy enough that some third party small company or even a small group of individuals, I don't know the background on Teleparty, if they can put it together in a Chrome extension, then your engineers should be able to put this together without too much difficulty.
Yeah, who has a really good content library, D, is HBO Max. I had not played around with it too much, full disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I jumped in and started digging around and I realized they got some good stuff in there. You have Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
Sopranos, Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think they own all the Sex in the City, right? And then I think the future Sex in the City stuff that's coming up. It's a big content library with a lot of people that follow that content. They must be doing quite well. Are they?
They've done better than a lot of their other competitors. So they're up to 37.7 million subscribers as of right now. So that's still lagging behind Disney because Disney's just crushing it. But it's definitely ahead of like Apple TV, who launched before them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I find really interesting about HBO Max, especially when it comes to these HBO shows, is they were in a lot of ways the first, at least in the US, to put out these TV shows that use a continuous storyline and were real serials where you watched one episode of Oz and the next week picked up the same storyline and kept going. It wasn't like a procedural
Mm-hmm.
like 21 Jump Street where every episode kind of stood on its own. So they were really the progenitors of what we now consider the new golden age of TV. And they have a lot of great TV content, and they have a lot of great HBO movies, original movies. And then they have all the Warner Brothers content also. So that means all the DC films, and all of the Warner Brothers. I mean, Warner Brothers as a studio goes back to, they were one of the first, like 1920s. I
Mm-hmm.
want to say at the very minimum. They have silent films in their catalog that were
Yeah.
produced by them.
Well, HBO was one of the first platforms that actually got you and me and the rest of our friends together every Sunday night to watch shows like The
Mm-hmm.
Sopranos and things like that, right? We would sit down and watch them. And also, some of the first that you would go online and they would have like the character maps, remember? And they would show you like whose uncle is who and and the full backstories
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. Not just for the latest stuff like Game of Thrones and all that, but all the way back to like you said, stuff like Sopranos and Oz and all that. I remember going online and actually trying to understand who is connected to who and why. Right.
yeah.
And I remember being very impressed with the amount of work that was being put in from these writers and developers to ensure that the storylines are present for all the viewers.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think they're kind of a sleeping giant. I think that HBO could come in and 2 years from now have 200 million subscribers.
Yes, I think that they have the franchise power, they have the creative ability, they have the back catalog of content, which is important. I think that gets understated sometimes. Some of the most successful stuff for Disney, for example, is like people watching the Simpsons episodes.
Yep.
So I think HBO Max has a really good chance. I think one of the things that they are late to the game and they've been a little confusing. They had HBO Go, they had HBO Now, all these different services. I remember back when we were first working on some streaming stuff very early on, and it was obvious at the time that cord cutting was an emerging trend. It was going to be the future. And the then CEO of HBO said that, oh, it's not happening. We're fully committed to distributing HBO through cable only. And then over time that gradually changed, but they were way behind. They could have been much further ahead than they are now.
Yeah, I think we actually wrote an article about it and mentioned it in there because it was so apparent to people who were conducting research in this space and kind of just looking at what the future would hold for streaming opportunities and cord cutting and all that kind of stuff, and they just didn't see it at the time. But you know what? They're catching up, and they're doing quite well. The next one on the docket is Apple TV. I have to tell you, we actually signed up for Apple TV temporarily.
Mhm.
We didn't keep the subscription just to watch Ted Lasso, and Ted Lasso was awesome.
Yeah, I haven't seen Ted Lasso yet. Like I did see Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet, and I loved that show.
Mm-hmm.
It took a few episodes to find its footing, but it was great. Ted Lasso is on my list, and I've heard great things about it. The challenge for me with Apple TV is once you watch Ted Lasso, which is, I think it's half-hour episodes, maybe like
Yeah.
8, 10 episodes or something like that. So you can breeze through it in like a day or two. What's after that?
Yeah, there wasn't anything else on there that we really wanted to connect with,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it just showed me that it's possible for any of these services to grab users and convince them to buy in for a short period of time if they have good content. It's very clear that content drives it because when you look at the differentiators between how the platforms function or how the platforms, I don't know, display content, things like that. It's all the same. It all looks the same. It all functions the same. It's easy to navigate. It's easy to find a show for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about content. And if you have the content, you have the users.
Well, I think that's absolutely the starting point. I think there comes a point in which the content will start to equalize, but I don't think Apple's anywhere there near there yet. And some of their shows, for some reason, have seemed to underperform. Like Jason Momoa had that show C, and my
Mm-hmm.
my partner Christine, she loves Jason Momoa, and I've asked her multiple times, "Oh, do you want to check out the show?" And she's kind of been like, maybe later." So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the one thing I'll say, D, is that like maybe more people would watch these shows if they didn't have to sign up for more services, right? And maybe the
yeah.
content's kind of hiding behind the cost of these services. If everything was equal, and if we were doing a research study and everything was equal, and we basically had people going in and watching shows, and then we were just counterbalancing which show they watched first and kind of looked at how they rated them and stuff like that, I bet you a lot of these shows would get good high ratings. It's just
Mhm.
even sometimes I'm exhausted. You'll tell me, you're like, you got to check this out. Like, do your research, watch this show. It's good. And I'm like, oh my God, I've watched so much stuff. Like, I'm kind of tired, right?
Yeah.
Content overload.
What's the thing is that I feel like it takes a certain number of shows in order to have certain hits, right? It might be like your hits are like 1 in 20 of the shows that you actually produce. So I think Apple will take a while to get there, and we'll see if they go the way of YouTube, where YouTube just kind of gave up on producing its own content. But Apple will continue to do that, and we predicted that Apple was going to struggle because they're kind of locked into just their Apple hardware purchases. So if you don't in the Apple hardware environment, you're kind of discouraged from getting Apple TV. And between you and I, right, we made the decision a while back that you would be in the Apple world and I would be in the Windows and Android world, so that we would
Yeah.
both have an understanding of both. And it fit for me because I was the gamer, so I was gonna lean towards PC anyway because the PC gaming environment is it's so much more robust than the Apple environment. But it's for me, it's like I've seen some things, but there's nothing that I'm just like, oh, I need to watch this or that, like some of the other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, to be fair though, I'm a bit jealous of the fact that you're building a gaming system because I
Yeah,
started doing research on it and I was like, that looks like a crazy awesome machine. So there is a part of me that's starting to creep back into the other side a little bit. So maybe I'll start playing around with some of the things that are on the Android side as well, just to try it out and do some comparisons because it's been a couple of years.
I've been heavy on console gaming for a long time, so now getting back into PC gaming a bit because now I can look at. Well, though I still have to try to find a graphics card, and right now that is a nightmare. But I feel like streaming video and gaming, kind of the conjunction between the two, is one of the things that are going to be the future for streaming
Yeah, I mean, they
services.
work well together. I mean, this is what a lot of these companies, I think, are trying to eventually do, which we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But I think that's kind of where things are heading. And I think those two work well together. They're like best friends, right? But let's talk about something else before we jump into that really quick. I wanted to ask about movie theaters. We haven't talked about it in a while, and I know we're going to do a podcast on the movie theater experience and circle back since it's been a year since the pandemic began. But do you miss it at all? Like, do you feel like you want to see some of these streaming shows and movies and content on the big screen, or are you just happy being at home now?
Oh, I really miss the movie theater experience, especially for me. Summer was the big thing because growing up we didn't have air conditioning, so on a really hot days, one of the things we would do is we'd go to the movie theater because it was air conditioned. You hang out for a while, you watch a great movie. I think the movie theater experience, the cinema experience, is still a unique and compelling experience. You're still going to watch a film in a different way than you would at home. One of the things that can happen is it's very easy to get distracted. You miss details. You don't necessarily have quite the same experience. And going to the theaters, waiting in line, hanging out with your friends, buying overpriced popcorn, that is just very compelling, unique experience that you can't necessarily get to at home. And even, you have the best home theater set up. Maybe if you're Michael Jordan or something, then you can have something fully set up. But for the rest of us out there, then we can get like a nice 60-inch TV and a sound bar and or a surround sound system and recliner seats and stuff. But you still have the option of hitting pause, right? You still have the pause button available to you, which sounds great, especially when you're at home and something might come up and you need to do something or somebody's going to call you. But that element of the movie theater experience where you turn off your phone or you're silent your phone and for just those 2 hours you're enveloped in this kind of protective cocoon of storytelling,
Hmm.
that is still going to be unique, and I think that is always going to have a place in our world.
Yeah, and I miss it as well. I've been very happy with the experience that I have in my house, but I
Hmm.
do miss I don't know, it's like one of those things where you're going to go get dinner and you're going to go have a movie and it's like a whole experience, it's a whole night away, right? And I
Yeah.
think that part and the smell of the popcorn when you walk in the door, you're about to see like an amazing movie. I will say though that I really hope they come back with subscription models for movies. I think that the test that was run by the different companies that tried it and failed a couple of years ago, I think what they're going to find now is that is what is going to actually save them, right? Is coming in and saying for $29 a month, you can come and see five movies in the movie theater and start getting people back in the seats because ultimately they make all their money through concessions, right? So what you have to do is give them the incentive in order to keep coming back and having food, right? It's not about the movie as much. Yes, the movie drives them in there, but the money is made at concessions.
Yeah, and I think that since every studio is now going or is soon going to have their own streaming service, maybe they already do. I think it makes sense to do that movie theater subscription thing as part of the bundle, right? Like, so maybe if you're a Disney Plus subscriber, maybe you get one or two free tickets a month or something to go see a movie in the theater, and
Awesome
that
idea.
is right. And especially because nowadays you can just distribute it through the app, right? You just bring up your Disney Plus app, you go to your movie showtimes, you pick a movie in a near theater, and you walk up, you just show them the QR code, and they scan it, and then you're into your theater, and it's already based on what's available to you in your library. So now you have the option. I would absolutely love if when Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out, for example,
Hmm.
if when it came out every Friday, and that's an interesting element of what Disney's bringing back also is that some things are bingeable and some things you have to wait. And we've done those things, some the research on release schedules and how that can affect people. But for WandaVision in particular, because it's a mystery, it gives you time to talk amongst your friends of like, what do you think is going on? But for a effects heavy show like Stranger Things or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and especially when you know it's coming out every Friday or every Sunday, I would love to go, and if I had that free movie ticket, especially or a reduced price or something like that, to go see that in the theater.
That would be so cool to pull up your app, your Disney app, and suddenly you walk in, you're like, here you go, beep, and you get to go see it. I mean, there could be the future of integration right here. You can integrate the Parks app with the Disney Plus app, with the movie app, and give people this full experience where it like pushes these coupon deals and all that kind of stuff, who constantly drives adoption. I mean, I get text messages from the place that sells boba down the street all the time. They're like 50% off if you drive over right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm on my way. Right. Like I feel like Disney could do the same and get my attention that way. Right.
Yeah,
Or other.
I think that the theaters are going to have to look at now. They've been protected for a long time in a non-exclusive content strategy, or an exclusive content strategy where they get these exclusive release windows. And I think honestly, I feel like it's been holding the theater experience back because they've been protected. They haven't had to compete in the same way. And once they won't, they're going to be forced to figure out, all right, well, how can we get new content strategies? What do people want to see in the theater, even if they have the option of seeing it at home? Right? Some things people still want to see in the theater. So Game of Thrones has some great stuff in there that I would love to see in a theater, even though I've already seen them. I'm sure there's a lot of other shows out there that would make great theater fodder. And some of it is going to be, I think we're going to find is that certain shows are better, or certain content in general, movies or shows, are better suited to the theater experience. And some of them are not. Like for me, comedies, I don't need to see a comedy in the theater at all. Like
Mhm.
it's completely based on kind of dialogue or maybe some sight gags or something like that. But I don't need a huge screen in order to get into it.
Be interesting to do research on that to find out what type of films people really want to see in the theater versus what they want to see at home versus
Hmm.
what they would watch on their phone, right? Because like I noticed, I'm looking at this data that you had sent over to me that you brought up, where you're talking about the different services that have ad supported options like Peacock and Hulu and CBS Access, and then you drop YouTube in there and it says 2 billion users, but only
Oh
30
yeah.
million paid subscribers. Okay, that's a lot of users, by the way. 2 billion users, but 30 million paid subscribers. Well, those particular users are looking mostly for short form content, right?
If you look at a lot of the YouTube producers out there right now, the content creators, I want to say that the average length of a video on YouTube for a lot of the people that I follow is 10 to 20 minutes or longer.
Yeah, me
So
too. Yeah, about 20
a lot
minutes.
of the streams are like 3 hours long. Like if you're looking at like a Twitch stream or something like that, or I've been getting into Minecraft more, but just because of like a weird combination of factors. But there's a Minecrafter named Mumbo Jumbo. I think he has 7 million subscribers. He did a live stream of him just on Minecraft, and I believe he's an electrical engineer by training, and he makes a lot of the engineering videos within Minecraft. But he did a live stream of him just digging up sand because he needed sand. He had, I want to say, like over a million people watching his live stream of him just digging up sand and talking, and it went for 3 hours. It was ridiculous. Like a million people signed in to watch a YouTuber just kind of like vlog, like talking about his life and digging up sand in Minecraft for 3 hours.
Oh yeah, I watch Adam Savage One Day Builds. He was the guy from MythBusters, and it's just really fascinating. He sits in his shop and he builds stuff. He was doing a Lego build that went on for like, I don't know, an hour or two, and like
Mhm.
30 or 40 or 50,000 people that watched him build this Lego set like from beginning to end. Like
Yeah.
I think there's also something meditative about watching other people do things.
Mhm.
that I think connects with users. But yeah. So, anyways, hey, let's wrap up here by talking about the future. I want to hear some bold predictions from you. That way, we can circle back again at the end of the year after we find out what's going on with these streaming services, and we can see whether or not we were right or wrong.
Well, I think eventually we're going to get to the point where everybody's going to have their content library filled up. I kind of already mentioned this before, and it's going to be less about who has the best content and more who delivers it the best way. So Netflix had the early advantage in this. They came out with all the stuff first. Them and YouTube. It's one of the reasons why those two are the granddaddies. YouTube for overall streaming and Netflix for paid subscription scripted content. And they were the ones who brought it out first, and you always knew that they were going to be the best at streaming something. You weren't going to be buffering or stuttering or any of that kind of thing. But then everybody else caught up because the knowledge just distributed through the environment. And now you would expect that everybody is going to stream content kind of reliably. Netflix and YouTube are probably still the best when it comes to recommendation engines and those features. But eventually, it's going to be what are the new experiences that they can deliver that other people might not. So those could be, the watch together, like we already talked about. Disney and Hulu have Group Watch and Watch Party. Amazon has Watch Party. Some of these other services, they'll need to catch up because that is something when you talk to people of what it means for example, like a military family to be able to sign in and watch a movie or a show with a family member deployed in Germany or somewhere else overseas. That's an extremely compelling experience.
Good point. Yeah, I like that. I mean, the fact is they can't be home, but they can still be together, right?
There's also, there's just discussion tools like The Walking Dead had that show, The Talking Dead, that they came on after every episode of Walking Dead, and it kind of became a staple with AMC to have a discussion show right after the show.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could have those kind of discussion tools built into it, like a subreddit, kind of built into the app, into the platform. But you could all do that within an app. So if Netflix had this, for example, you could watch an episode of Stranger Things and then just in the app that you already have open on your phone, just discuss it with other people.
I feel like what you're talking about are a series of features that all of these services will eventually need to integrate. And if they don't, then they're going to start getting pushback from their users. And then they're just going to have to do it. I don't think they would leave the platform if they don't have things like Watch Together or if they don't have places where they can go and chat about shows in the platform. But I think what it does is it creates the stickiness of these users and allows them to stick onto your platform for a lot longer, which is what you want, which is basically time on
Yeah.
task, right?
So it becomes like with discussion tools, for example, you can build community. You can get to know somebody for the first time based on your shared love of Game of Thrones, for example, right? And then that becomes the kind of thing where people are less likely to cancel their subscription because they don't want to lose access to their buddy that they made on over their shared interest over this TV show or this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is when it comes down to competitive differentiators, right? If you're looking at Disney and you're looking at Netflix, and you personally feel like they are equivalent on content, but you only want to normally subscribe to one, maybe you'll bump one up every now and then. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of them is your one, and one of them is your 1A, and you're just going to sign up for one of them for a couple months a year in order to catch up on what you've missed.
Mm-hmm.
A feature like Watch Together can be the difference maker.
Yeah,
So,
it really could. It really could be.
mhm,
So I was thinking about this, and I think I have two predictions, just two this time.
mhm,
I think that Hulu is going to get fully integrated into Disney Plus, and I think it's going to bump up the user base even more. And I think it's going to be a better experience. You go to Disney Plus, you can access all the content from Hulu. You can also access all of the original content and cataloged content. I think it's a home run hit. I just feel like having two different services is not what people want. People want everything in one spot. They want to know where to get it. I think that's going to happen. Number two is I think Netflix is going to test getting into gaming. I think it is a no-brainer for them. They have hundreds of millions of users, tons of them are people who love gaming. And I feel like it's a no-brainer. And I'm not saying that they're going to necessarily start creating their own games or anything. It could be a partnership, it could be an acquisition. I just feel, it's just a gut feeling that they're going to move into that space and they're going to do well in that space.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on both fronts. I think Hulu is in this weird spot where Disney almost, I mean, you have the bundle, but in a certain extent, it's kind of competing with itself for eyeballs, right?
Exactly.
You can be in the Disney Plus experience or you can be in the Hulu experience, but you can't watch two pieces of content at the same time, so you have to pick one or the other.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
looked it up while you were mentioning something earlier, and it did say on there that Disney does now own the majority share of Hulu.
they've owned the majority. It's just what do you do with those other shareholders, right? So
Yeah.
the options for Disney long term are either absorb Hulu fully and buy out those other stockholders, or work out some kind of deal with them, or spin it out and just divest. And that means you might take your IP off of their platform. That could be maybe they have access to some of that IP for a short period of time and then they don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that anybody's really going to want to run Hulu without some of the Disney content that's available on there. So the more likely thing is it's just going to get absorbed into Disney and be consolidated with Disney Plus. It makes sense for them to have ESPN Plus separate because
Yeah, that does. Yeah.
that's just a different category of content. But Hulu, it doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah, and I think it was a good start for them. They made their investment into it, kind of dabbled with it while they were building, I think, purchasing BAM Tech, I think it was, and then
Mm-hmm.
building their own platform. And now it's time to kind of stitch them all together and watch it all grow. But
Yeah.
hey, this was really fun, D. I'm glad we circled back on this. Let's circle back again at the end of the year because I think that would be a great time to look back and see how all these services did in 2021. And with that said, we will see everyone next week. Oh, and don't forget, please subscribe, share with your friends. The platform is growing, and we'd love to have even more people listening to us every week. All right, everyone, have a great week. Goodbye.